I'm Allison Matthews. So the Faith Coordinating Center is a brand new coordinating center. It's funded by Gilead Sciences, and we are part of a $100 million initiative from Gilead Sciences over the course of 10 years to support the community-based efforts, especially among Black, Indigenous, and Latino-led organizations in the U.S. South to address HIV stigma. So I don't know how do I afford just push the green button? Yes. Okay. And so in partnership with Emory University, University of Houston, and Southern AIDS Coalition, we are the fourth coordinating center, and we are specifically focused on faith-based initiatives. And this is important because in the United States, you all have presented so much wonderful kind of evidence of the work that's being done internationally, but in the United States, this work has really kind of fallen by the wayside and lost steam. And so Gilead felt it was important to reignite some of that energy around faith-based initiatives. And I think what's unique about this moment in time in the United States is because of the COVID pandemic, churches are actually now more likely to be online, to have Facebook. They're hosting their church events online on Sundays, and so we have an opportunity to engage them through the internet, as well as there's been increasing positive attitudes toward same-sex marriage and LGBT folks, especially among Black Americans and Black church-going people, and increasingly among Black millennials and Gen Z. So we are in a unique moment in time where faith leaders understand the importance of engaging around health, especially around COVID-19, and also now getting online and this kind of improving attitudes. Of course, we see a lot in the United States that is very negative against LGBT folks in the United States and also against COVID-19. But that's a very loud minority. The majority of Americans actually have very positive attitudes, and those attitudes have improved, especially among African Americans. And so the mission of our center is to transform the story, to use storytelling, training, and grant making to challenge stigmatized faith-based narratives about people living with HIV and those vulnerable to and affected by HIV. We do this by adopting a holistic approach. We believe that in order for us to achieve this, we have to do it through healing, transformation, and wellness. So we're taking a holistic approach to addressing HIV stigma in faith communities, and we're also taking an interfaith approach. So not just Christian, but traditional African spirituality in the United States, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and Islam, right? So we have actually a community advisory board that has representation from all of those faith traditions and those who no longer practice. We want to make sure that their perspectives and their experiences are reflected in the work that we do, the messages that we put out, the organizations that we fund and we work with. So this is our team. It is a growing team. I want to also make the point that we are in the Divinity School, which is unique, right? We're traditionally public health, School of Medicine approaches, but I think being in the Divinity School is unique because we are actually engaging in conversation with faith leaders about the theology about HIV and the theology of healing, the theology of sexuality, right? And also challenging some of the narratives that they've kind of internalized that are really false interpretations of sacred text. And so challenging some of those theological approaches. And so we have a team of people a combination of those who are divinity scholars and also public health. And so I want to point out that Reverend Dr. Shonda Jones is the principal investigator. I'm the executive director. I'm a public health sociologist. And then we have Mia Sloan, who's a pastor, Tarsha Bannister, who is also a pastor and a a first lady of a church, and Reverend Demi McCoy, and Marcus is public health, and then William Boyce is also, he's a PhD in divinity. So, we have that kind of diversity of thought in the work that we do. So the main thrusts for our center are to conduct trainings with nonprofit organizations who are focused on addressing stigma in faith communities. So we work a lot with organizations who then go out into the community and do their own trainings and their own engagement with faith leaders in their own networks. And so we're doing kind of a train the trainer model. So the trainings that we cover, and all of these are virtual trainings that we offer over Zoom. And a lot of times we'll even live stream them to YouTube and Facebook. So it also creates opportunity for people who may not necessarily have thought about these topics but are interested, that they can also join. So we cover these topics around interfaith partnerships, HIV in the South, Black sexuality, queer and liberation theologies, womanist theologies, and then also kind of some capacity building topics around how to actually use social media to engage audiences about HIV and faith, how to implement trauma-informed care in their faith-based settings, and how to run a nonprofit, right? So I think those are all really well-received trainings that we've done. We fund, like I mentioned, we also grant out money. So this was from our last cohort from 2021. They're funded for 1 year each. And so you see it kind of, and each one of these is different levels of funding. So we have the lowest amount of funding that we give is $25,000, and the highest amount was $200,000. And so the faith capacity building level is the $200,000 all the way down to faith actions, $25,000. And so it provides opportunity for newer organizations. Maybe an organization only is an organization of one, but it provides them with the opportunity to get their foot in the door and get some funding, do some pilot programming. And then as we move up the levels, some of these national organizations like Interfaith Youth Corps works with 20 historically Black colleges and universities across the South. And Vision Community Foundation has a network of over 1,000 faith leaders that they work with. And so we fund them, we train them, and then they go and then implement that training with their networks. So this is the example of our funded organizations. Some of them we have funded for a second year because they just did a wonderful job, and we want to continue working with them. Also this year, we have a new funding category called Learning It Together, which is an artist cohort. And so with that artist cohort, we're working with artists across the South who are doing different projects. One is a play, What's in the Mirror. They do plays in Austin, Texas. Sean Crawley is doing an installation where it's kind of a mixture of music and visual art, and it's reflecting on people who have died from complications with AIDS who are also church musicians. And then Lauren Whitney of Authentic Voices is doing a documentary on people who are formerly incarcerated and went through educational programs to achieve college degrees. And Emilio Aponte Sierra is doing a kind of figures of women who have HIV, and then using the figures, the models that he's creating, and the dresses and things like that to garner attention around messages about HIV and faith, and partnering with faith-based organizations in Florida. So. Also, I want to point out that those organizations are located in 12 states across the United States. So this is another example of ways that we are using storytelling to start off conversations, to ignite conversation. So we use videos. We actually worked with Gilead and faith leaders to be in this video. And with this video, we also have created a discussion guide, a toolkit that faith communities can use to have conversation around the themes in the video. Oh, it didn't play? Can you all play it from the computer? Can you just click on it?
Hey, you. Yes, you.
And you, and you, have you seen the path? It's a path that's always been there.
It is a path forged for us by our ancestors, and now we must bravely walk it ourselves. It is a path that starts with justice and focuses on just us.
You are connected to the divine. And the divine is connected to you. Yeah, you. The divine created you, communicates with you, loves you.
It's time to give ourselves permission to evolve and allow our faith to do its work as a radical liberator.
Is it time? It's time. It's well past time.
It's time to change the conversation around HIV.
We must embrace our brothers and sisters living with HIV in our communities and in our places of worship. Put our faith into action. Because it's not a conversation about them. It's a conversation about us. Transformation, freedom, and liberation can only happen when they're led by truth. Our truth.
So let's chart out a new path that others can follow. Path grounded in our collective legacy of Black joy.
Let's start holistically healing, spiritually, emotionally, physically, geographically.
We are created by the divine. Now we can co-create the world we want, the world we deserve. Each day is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to change. And change will be realized when we fully see each other.
You are a part of us, and we are a part of you.
So let's help each other. Let's learn from each other. Let's continue to build our own institutions and create our own solutions.
Because we all have that power.
And it is well within our reach.
Thank you. So we're going back to the slides. So in addition to the videos that we produce like those, we also, I'm going to skip this because we all know what the stigma in faith spaces are. And so some of the ways that we are working to address that are in the ways that we also suggest for faith communities that we are training and working with is to host these HIV discussions in settings inside and outside the faith gathering spaces, creating social justice ministries, HIV ministries, using social media, engaging other traditional forms of media, TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, and blogs, and working with faith leaders on HIV campaigns and convening regular meetings with interfaith leaders. I'm gonna skip that. So, in addition, we have hosted a conference. It's called Proclamation at the Intersections. It was in Dallas, Texas, and we had about 150 people attend the conference, which was great for the first time. It was the first time, really, that we've ever seen a conference that was focused on the intersections of HIV and faith in the United States. So we had faith leaders, we had public health practitioners and researchers. We had divinity scholars and people people living with HIV and people who are on the ground organizing in their communities. And we had workshops and panel discussions and plenary sessions. We had yoga and meditation, right? And so not only just thinking about the public health approach to things, but then also thinking about how we're feeding into, pouring into those people who are doing the work. We also had the National Memorial AIDS Quilt that was featured at the conference. And the panels that we had featured at the conference included those of African American people who died from complications with AIDS. And it was really moving because I actually had the opportunity to have one of the blocks dedicated to one of my family members who died from complications with AIDS, and my family was there to commemorate his name. And so I think that, thinking about how it's not only about the faith community, but about the family and how faith is at the center of the connections that you have with family. In addition to that, we are rolling out some new projects that I would love to hear from you all and get some collaboration on. We have a faith-based HIV work survey that we are working with AIDSView to develop a national faith-based service locator so that people can go to aidsview.org and be able to search by zip code and identify faith-based organizations that are doing HIV work and be connected in and finding that kind of faith support. And we're compensating $25 for you to take the survey. We also have an HIV and Faith Ambassador program that we are launching in North Carolina, where we are, again, doing trainings with them, with faith leaders, and actually coupling it with Black doctors in North Carolina. So there are faith leaders and doctors who are ambassadors. We do the trainings with them. We talk about how they can collaborate with each other. We get them connected to health departments, to their local health departments, and to their health systems. And then we actually are working with them to develop social media campaigns and videos that they can then disseminate out throughout their communities. In addition, we've worked on a national level with addressing HIV-related stigma. So DaBaby is a rapper that said some really inflammatory comments, and so we wrote an open letter that actually got a lot of traction in the news and invited him in to have a conversation with people living with HIV so he could learn more. And so he actually did participate in that conversation. We partnered with Lil Nas X, who is a hip-hop/country music star, and he is known for being openly Black and gay. And he worked with us to have a member of our Compass Initiative team to be in his performance at the MTV Video Music Awards, and then that also caught national media attention, and we were able to raise awareness about the number of people living with HIV in the South. And we've also put out some news articles with our funded partners, Interfaith America, in the Washington Post and other news outlets. In addition to that, we've developed a faith and HIV, a faith leader toolkit that has examples of prayers, scripture passages, interfaith approaches to talking about HIV in their faith communities, rituals and things like that you can integrate into your worship experience. And so if you want a copy of it, please let me know. I'm happy to send you a PDF of it. And we also worked with the National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day and funded them to develop a video where they talked about the intersection of faith and HIV. In addition to that, we are launching a blackfaith.org website. It is a continuation of a partnership, the original partnership was with Gilead and NAACP, where they did the Black Faith and HIV.org, Black Church and HIV.org website, and they worked with faith communities across the United States, over 2,000 faith leaders that they worked with. That initiative has ended, and so we are now taking it over and revamping it and trying to make it more appealing to a younger audience, especially, and also interfaith audience, and so we've changed the colors. We've made it Black Faith in HIV instead of Black Church, because we didn't want it to just be Christian focused, and tried to make it, much more appealing to a younger audience. So that's in the works. It hasn't launched yet, but that's in the works. We've also developed strategic partnerships with national organizations. The Links Incorporated is a national Black women-led community service organization that has thousands of members across the United States. We work with AIDSView, like I mentioned, historically Black colleges and universities, where we give them, or our funded partner gives out mini grants to those organizations or to those universities, and then they implement campus-led initiatives and student-led initiatives, and then they also integrate material into the course material. We worked with divinity schools and to train future faith leaders and chaplains, and also with the Centers for AIDS Research and GLAAD, which is the Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation that works with the media. And so GLAAD was actually a very important partnership for us because they connected us to Lil Nas X and to DaBaby and to these national artists. And then the AIDS Training and Education Center, I think it's important for us to not only train people, but give them credentials. And so we're working with ATEC. So as we do these trainings with faith leaders, we're giving them official certificates that they could use to enhance their careers. And so that concludes my presentation. Please follow us on Faith Compass WFU on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can email me, compass@wfu.edu. Thank you.
George?
Yes. Are there any questions that anyone has?
We have one in the room, George.
Okay, I don't.
It's a real simple question. Mike.
It's a real simple question. In a lot of my regional work, we have this dilemma of what is the South? And you included Texas in your conference. I'm wondering how you defined your region.
First of all, I take offense to you not including Texas in the South. I am from Texas. We are Southern. Yeah, no. Oh. So the official definition includes 12 states that were identified by Gilead. So we're a little constricted because even though Virginia and Maryland and DC are technically below the Bible Belt, they are not included in our funding. But it does include, goes from Texas to Florida. It includes Kentucky, right, and Kentucky is the South, and goes up to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, etc.
I just have to also say that I wish Washington, D.C. was part of that conversation because we are facing a lot of stigma here in the district itself as well. Are there any other questions you have?
And that decision was based on the allocation of funding, knowing that DC, Maryland, and Virginia get a lot more funding than these states that don't get as much funding and have a very high prevalence.
But you did say at some point that you're going national. I remember that phrase. What do you mean by that if you're focused on
Well,
the
so
South?
as a faith coordinating center, even though we are primarily funded by Gilead, we do have the flexibility to explore additional funding and to partner with national organizations. So, you know, as we continue to expand our partnerships with funding, we'll be able to expand that. Yeah.
Awesome. We got one more question. This will be our last question.
Great presentation. I had 2 questions. So the trauma-informed care and faith in faith spaces, is that primarily for the use in HIV ministries? Like, how is that being implemented in faith spaces?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, no, it's not just HIV ministries. A lot of our programming while it does focus on HIV, we also acknowledge that there are ways to enter into more conservative spaces by talking about topics that are beyond just HIV. And so we are able to engage with more conservative spaces by talking about mental health, talking about racialized trauma, talking about gender-based violence and domestic violence, and all of those mechanisms of experiencing trauma. And so the Trauma-Informed Care series, we work with people who are experts in that, and then they talk about the body, they talk about spirituality, they talk about how the strategies to identify trauma in the body, and how it manifests in stress and in body aches and things like that, and then they give them the tools on how to process that and then work through it. And so it's more of a kind of a holistic approach, but then we talk about how those messages around your gender and your racial identity and sexuality are layered onto the stigma that comes from living with HIV.
Awesome. And then my final question was, as far as I can see on the slides, with the exception of the Southern AIDS Coalition, it seemed like all the Compass partners were high-level academic institutions. Are those all the institutions that are being funded by the Compass initiatives?
No, so the organizations that are funded by the initiative are nonprofit, small, grassroots organizations. The coordinating centers are the ones who get the funding. We facilitate the grant, the RFPs, and we facilitate the trainings, but all of the money, so we are all, each one of us are tasked with putting $1 million into the community every year. And so that's $4 million that's going into the community every year, in addition to funding that comes from direct giving from Gilead. So that $100 million includes Southern HIV Impact Fund with AIDS United, our 4 coordinating centers, plus direct giving that goes from Gilead.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. Thank you, George, for your moderation. We appreciate you. Before we transition into our monitoring and evaluation session, I do want to note that the documentary that Dr. Matthews mentioned, My Faith, My Story, will be screened in the Global Village on this Sunday, July 31st at 3:25 p.m. if you're interested in viewing that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ayoko Bahun Wilson, working as the regional coordinator for West Africa, the World Council of Churches, Ecumenical HIV and AIDS Initiatives and Advocacy. Today is Thursday. We are in black. Thursday in black. How many of us know about Thursday in black? For a world free of violence. So I will encourage all of us to join the campaign and be in black every Thursday to stop the violence in the world. Taking action to overcome stigma and discrimination. Despite the plurality of existing monitoring and evaluation frameworks, it is important for faith communities to choose the right contextual monitoring and evaluation framework to help them overcome stigma and discrimination. Faith communities need adequate and appropriate monitoring and evaluation mechanisms that take into consideration the realities of the context for an objective capitalization of the work they are doing. Our speakers will help us to answer a crucial question, which is the last session for our 2 days being together. What monitoring and evaluation frameworks are in place that can be adapted to faith-based interventions to effectively address stigma and discrimination? Our first speaker is Shobhana Ramachandran, who is the Associate Director of Strategic Information and Evaluation at the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. Then we'll have Tiffany Aholu, HIV Testing Service Team, the Division of the Global HIV and TB, HIV Prevention Branch, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And finally, we'll have John Blevins from Emory University. Shobhana, you have the floor.